Okay, let's dive into one of the most revolutionary speeches ever given. It's found in the Gospel of Matthew, and it took a 1,400-year-old legal and moral system and completely turned it on its head. It's a series of powerful contrasts that challenged everything people thought they knew about being good. Now, to really get what's happening, you have to understand the journey this law had been on. The original law given to Moses way back in 1400 BC wasn't what people were practicing in the first century. Not really. Over time, it got buried under all these layers of human interpretation. So Jesus shows up, and his goal is to basically excavate it, to cut through all the noise and get back to the heart of it all. So you can just imagine what everyone in the crowd was thinking. This new teacher comes along, starts questioning tradition. The big question on everyone's mind must have been, is he here to tear it all down? Is this the end of everything we know? Well, he answers that question right off the bat, and his answer sets the stage for everything he's about to say. He's not here for demolition. He says he's here for fulfillment. He's here to restore the law's original purpose, to show what it was always supposed to mean in its deepest, truest sense. And this whole idea of fulfillment, well, it all comes down to this gap that had formed over hundreds of years. It's the gap between what the law actually said in the original texts and the complex web of traditions that had been taught for generations. You see, these interpretations, which came from religious experts like the scribes and Pharisees, had become the main filter through which everybody saw the law. So for the average person, what they heard wasn't just the raw command. It was the command plus all this added commentary. And this is where it gets really good. Jesus basically sets up this incredible side-by-side comparison. He goes point by point, contrasting what the people had heard from their teachers with what he says God meant from the very beginning. He kicks things off with one of the big ones, a command everybody knew by heart, straight from the Ten Commandments. You shall not murder. Now, the common teaching had pretty much boiled this down to a simple legal rule. As long as you didn't physically take someone's life, you were in the clear. You were considered a good person. The focus was totally on the external act. You could check the box and move on.
And then he drops the bombshell. Notice he doesn't quote another rabbi. He says, "But I say to you." I mean, that's a stunning claim of personal authority. And with that one phrase, he yanks the whole conversation out of the courtroom and places it right inside the human heart.
He's revealing that the law was never just about stopping the final terrible act. It was always aimed at the root of the problem, the anger, the contempt, that bitter feeling towards someone else, because that's where violence actually begins. And this brilliant move, this pivot from the external action to the internal motive, it isn't just a one-off trick. It's the exact pattern he uses for a bunch of other core commands. He does the exact same thing with adultery. The tradition only focused on the physical act, which, left a pretty big loophole for all sorts of internal corruption. Jesus just slams that loophole shut. He says the real violation begins with lust in the heart. You can imagine how uncomfortable that made some people. And you see this pattern play out again and again across the board. Where tradition had allowed for easy divorce, he calls for covenant faithfulness. Instead of these complex, tricky oaths, he calls for simple truthfulness. The whole eye for an eye thing, it's no longer about getting even, it's about showing radical mercy. And that command to love your neighbor, that just got expanded to include loving your enemies too. So when you stand up and challenge centuries of established tradition like this, it says something really profound about who you think you are. It's not just what he's saying, it's the unbelievable authority with which he says it. And let's be super clear, he wasn't making things easier. He wasn't watering down the law. It was the exact opposite. He was showing everyone that the real standard had always been impossibly high. The focus was never just on an external checklist of actions. It was about the very core of our character. And this, right here, is why the crowd was so absolutely stunned. You see, the scribes would always quote other experts to back up their arguments. They taught their interpretations of the law. Jesus doesn't do that. He speaks with the authority of the lawgiver. It's like he's the one who wrote the rules in the first place. This final observation from the crowd just nails it. It perfectly captures how revolutionary this all sounded. They knew they weren't just listening to another teacher. This was something else entirely. The authority was just undeniable. Which leaves us with this huge question, one that rings just as true today. It's easy enough to follow the letter of the law, right? To just check all the boxes. But what would actually change in our lives if we started focusing on the spirit of the rule? What happens when we care less about what we do and more about the true intent of our hearts?